Hit
Hello.
the button.
Go for it. As soon as the clock ticks 4 o'clock, 1 p.m.,
1 p.m.
wherever you are. Hello, everyone. We're live.
Yeah, we are.
Hi, Rick. Good to see you. I am
Yes.
excited.
I'm
Just the
sorry.
two of us.
It's just the two of us. Yes, and we were singing "It's Just the Two of Us" just prior
Just
to coming
two
on.
of
So
us.
I kind of were laughing a little bit, but yeah, I kind of disappeared on you last week. So,
Right.
but
Very good.
everything's fine. Everything's back to sort of quasi normal.
Right. I'm very happy with that because obviously it was a very serious and good reason why you weren't here.
Yeah, there was a lot of unknowns that were going on
Right.
all at once. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And we even talked about, because when I talked to you, then I got a chance to talk to you, you seemed to be managing it pretty well. And yeah, I felt like reflecting back what I was observing, and I found it to be remarkable. It's part of walking a talk. When the moment hits, when the going gets rough, that's when the talk turns into the walk. And yeah, I'm
Yeah.
very impressed.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Take it. Take the compliment, Rick.
I'll take the compliment. I got an, it's, and that's interesting because, you talk about, um, I was in a coaching call about how we grade ourselves
Mm,
and why are we not giving ourselves an A plus,
right.
right? And and what are we measuring that A plus up against, or any measurement up against? And I think that sort of gets into a little bit about our topic, but I just want to acknowledge a couple of things. I have many women in my life, and in a very very good way. I was like,
You do.
that
Poor
sounds like so
daughter,
funny. I mean, I've got
dog.
I've got five in the house, like raised 4 girls and 4 very powerful girls, and my wife, very powerful woman herself, and you being part of my life for the last couple of
Oh,
years, very powerful.
thank you.
Yeah, I just want to acknowledge International Women's Day.
Oh, right. Thank you. Thank
Yeah,
you, love.
because
Yeah.
uh, that's one thing that me and my wife were talking about last night. Looking at the news and various things that are going on around the world. The equality thing. I can never understand why, if you're doing the same work, why just because you happen to be female get less for that work. It just, it never really made sense to me. And yet it continues to happen all over the place, right?
Been happening in countries, it's like it's all the whatever is left over, what we didn't have awareness of, we're not able to extract from the system. It's within the system,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
A lot of it is built in because it's been centuries of this. And hopefully things are going to shift. It's just not going to happen one day to the other.
No, no. And I forget the guy's name, but he was addressing the United Nations. Um, and he felt that it was going to take 3 generations to actually, you know, see the equality that we're talking about, right?
Right,
I hope it doesn't take 3 generations. I hope that my grandchildren um, will be that generation.
right, right. And I think it's hopeful. I think it's well, we from, I'm going to put myself with you, we don't see from our point of view is
No.
what this new generation has the ability to peek into through social media, through information being so available to them. We didn't have, right? So we just came to this place with all of the conditioning and the beliefs and the things that we knew, and we project from that place, right? I'm guessing this person that was addressing the United Nations wasn't super young, right? So they're all projections, like, and I'm not trying to say young versus old, but there's like, there are things that are like, it's good to open up to have that flexibility to see the new and welcome it.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's necessarily something that we all embrace, because we were also like raised to believe the old ways are the better way. Like in my days, I caught myself saying that a few times when I became a mom. And I was like, you know what? I have to stop this. I have
Yeah.
to stop this, because it's a moment that we question that and we remain curious and consider all the other perspectives on this new thing that we're now considering or allowing in, that we can truly see the potential that it has, but we're always making judgments and projecting from our current understanding of the world,
Yep.
right? Which is not absolute. It's absolutely not a truth that,
No, no, it's very, very subjective.
that is,
Yeah, and it's very personal, right? And we're always operating from that level of belief that we think is what we're seeing, right? So I mean, it's knowing that is helpful.
yes, it is. I mean, I think there's truth in what he was saying, in the sense that we don't really realize how seeped into our systems and beliefs and upbringing and conditioning all of this is. Even if you look at the laws, I know I bring this up a lot, that, especially like matrimonial laws, like there's a lot of it that's like really dated, that needs a good look. Could be changed, but who is in charge of that?
Yeah.
Someone that has the upbringing of that conditioning, that believes those laws, that, like, so it's not as easy as saying now we see it and we change it, until the change comes from each individual. That change is not going. So in a sense, there is some truth that it may take a few generations, but the change always starts somewhere, right? It's about letting go of being the ones, bringing on the change and seeing it in our lifetimes. That may not happen in
No,
lifetimes.
and it's an interesting segue, because what are we talking about today?
Apparently, whatever we're talking about, LinkedIn thought that it needed to be banned.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. So big announcement: we got banned from LinkedIn. The LinkedIn police
go to
have
YouTube. Yeah.
decided to.
Well, maybe it is showing. It looks like it's showing, but who knows? Yeah, let's talk about duality. Let's talk about this contrast, right? Of how do we know where the light is if we haven't seen darkness, right? How do we know what like happiness is and joy is if we haven't felt sadness, right?
Yeah, very, very deep subject, and I'm encouraging people that are listening live to interact with us. I want to hear your experiences too, as we sort of go into the subject a little bit more, and your questions and any other comments that you might have. And even if you're watching the recording right now, you can still do the same, because we still get the comments back to us through our emails and notifications. So we love to engage with our audiences this way. And it keeps us fresh and new too, because I'm not going to pretend that I know all the answers. I can only tell you what I've experienced. And you talk about the change, like there is a turning point, and we. So how do you identify that turning point, and this notion about rock bottom, right? It's like it's an interesting subject to me, because we've had a variety of different people on our show in the past, and we have a couple coming up that talk about their own personal experiences of rock bottom. And in fact, there's one individual that's is sharing with us that he feels he never really hit a rock bottom.
Right.
Yeah, but there has to be a turning point. So what is a turning point?
Well, he felt actually that there was like a lack in him, because he didn't hit that rock bottom. So he didn't have that push that someone may have from being in that bottom, where there's nowhere else to go, where it feels like that is. And by the way, that rock bottom is very different for each one of us.
Yes.
Rock bottom may look very different than yours, and so on, right? But there is some strength, there's some motivation that builds in that place of being at the bottom, right? That
Mm-hmm.
pushes us to now search for the opposite of that, to come out of that, right? And every time I ask this question to our guests who have had a variety of incredible life experiences,
Yes. Yes.
no one truthfully can really speak to it from a place of experience because their experience is that rock bottom, right?
Yeah.
So it's been interesting to hear how everyone has addressed this, but how no one can really speak from a place of experience, personal experience.
Mm-hmm.
Very
Yeah.
fun.
It's I mean, culturally, I wonder, like, this is kind of like a bit of an anecdotal funny, I find it funny, story about my own personal growing up. um I wanted to be a singer, songwriter. I wanted to be a rock songwriter. Yeah, I'm having problems with words today. The and so what do? Well, you go to the library and you get a book, and I found a book that says how to be a rock and roll songwriter. And as I'm reading this book, it basically says you have to come from struggle, you have to come from a deep place
Right.
to tell a story. Well, I guess I can't be a writer because I don't have that experience, at least at that point in time, right? So so we talk about, there's something, somebody's teaching something that basically says if you don't have any kind of struggles, it's very hard for you to relate to anybody.
Right.
And so there's this notion that we need struggle, we need discomfort, we need to rise up from something, so we can be more accepted. Maybe I don't really know. Like, is it really necessary to get to a point where people go, oh yeah, I get it, oh yeah, you've struggled really hard, I get all the pain that you've had. Like, I guess you know what I'm saying.
There's a lot of beliefs and in there too, right?
Mm-hmm.
You need the struggle in order to be able to, there's a level of putting a lot of importance onto that. And I think there is importance to that, but it's not necessarily in that form, right?
Yeah.
I think going through darkness, hitting rock bottom, first of all, if you really look at your challenges as a way to not only discover what wants to come out and transform within you, it just becomes guidance, right? Like pain in on itself, when we learn this, pain in and of itself is only going to last so long, right? It's about ruminating that pain
Mm-hmm.
that keeps us there, that creates the suffering, right? Because really, that painful experience in that moment is just showing us something that we
Yeah.
can learn from, right?
Yeah.
It-
and,
It's
and
it's when we spend too much time in it that it becomes that keeps us there.
well, and add more meaning. And I'm going to bring in we have a comment from audio girlfriend. And but it's a really it's a good one, because it says, may I ask how the duality can be comforting, and even if you've experienced so much sadness and mostly pain with health and losing loved ones. I mean, it the duality world basically says, how do you know you're feeling anything if there's no contrast to that feeling?
Right?
So how do I know I'm happy if I've not felt some other kind of emotion
Sadness, right?
or sadness? How do I know I'm sad, right? I mean, other than, labels, right?
Right.
I shared a story of a friend of mine that showed me a video of her nephew, who was, I think, 2 years old or 3 years old, and they had this picture book and it was pictures of different faces or expressions of different emotions. And the child was asked to mimic, show me a sad face. And of course, he'd be looking at a sad face, and then he would mimic what a sad face was. Show me a happy face, and you'd see a big smile on the thing, and then, right? So where did we learn? This is the part that interests me. Where did I learn that was sad?
Right.
Right? Who, or even happy, like what the experience of happiness. Oh, you're feeling happiness. Like, how did I learn that kind of stuff? So I find origins very interesting, and I also like what you're saying about the notion around really understanding what emotions are really telling us, like our feelings. And I've always, had them as they're gauges, right? They just tell us not necessarily about the circumstances, and the circumstances can be tragic, like she's alluding to around health concerns and losing loved ones. But when you look at them from the analogy of a check engine light, when I'm feeling, and we talk about my dad collapsing and me rushing him to the hospital and things like that, there was a lot of emotions that were going on there, but those emotions were checked in the sense of, okay, I'm feeling this way right now. Is that helpful?
Right.
Do I need to be in this mode, right? And it's just a reminder of recognizing. So without the contrasts, how will I ever recognize anything?
Right. I mean, I would say with loss specifically, right? I think that the most, like the most surprising and challenging part of loss is when you lose someone. It's only when you lose someone that you really look back and appreciate all the moments that you had, and the regret comes in, right? Grief is such a complicated process, right? The regret of like, when I had this person, I could have done this and I didn't. When I had this person, like it's really the moment that we lose someone, right? That we start appreciating what we had even more, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that is not something that we appreciated before, but when that happened with my husband, I was like 30 years old. That contrast was really there for me. Like I really saw all of the things that annoyed me about him, that all the fights that we would have, like they really crumbled, in front of this contrast of, like the moment that I didn't have it anymore, that the love was gone. I appreciated that love even more. I could see it even more. I could feel it even more. But when I had it, I probably didn't appreciate it as much as I did until I lost it, or didn't reflect on it the way I did once it was gone, right? Part of it probably had to do with my age. Part of it had to do probably with when you're younger, you don't really think about things this way. But that contrast was very present for me.
Yeah.
Like, and if we always had something, when we always have something, that becomes our normal. So even within happiness, let's say that was even possible to always be up here and high.
Yeah.
That's gonna be your new normal. You're not gonna know the difference unless there's a drop or a peak in that, because then now that's your normal. So the contrast is really there to show you that difference.
Absolutely.
Right.
And when you look at any, like even from a nature examples, like vibrations and things like that, they're always like this, right? And there's a great Zen story around the farmer, right? Like the farmer that loses his horse, and the neighbors come over and they say, "Oh, what a tragic event that you lost your horse." And the farmer just went, "Maybe,
Maybe yes, maybe not. Yeah.
maybe, yeah, exactly, right." So like, and I know when it's really personal, like like when you lose a loved one, to say that would be heartless,
Right.
but waves always happen. Life happens in cycles. Like there's always seems to be ups and there's always seems to be downs, right? It's when we kind of get caught in the trough where we're always noticing, God, life just seems more down than it seems to be up.
Right.
And it does sometimes take a moment where we can call it the turnaround, we can call it the rock bottom, we can talk about it. I was thinking about it today, our intolerance for, like, we just get tired of being at the bottom,
Right.
and we kind of want to make a change.
Right.
We don't want to feel this way anymore. And so we're looking towards something different to move us out.
But also, we had never felt, when you're at the bottom, if you had never felt the joy of being, somewhere else, right? Being on a higher level, you would not have anything to look up to. You would give up. You would sit where you're at, right? So,
Well, it looks like no hope.
right, there will be no hope.
Yeah.
So knowing that the difference is what is going to drive you to want to get back there, right? Yeah. And at the same time, when your life is going really well, if you've been down there, then you're gonna do anything that you possibly can not to go back down that way, right? Because you have known that contrast. There's always going to be a first moment when you experience that. But until you have experienced it, you don't really know the difference. Like,
no, and then it is part of that experience. And that, when you see how the world is set up, it's set up in this duality, contrasting, a number of different,
men and women,
well, men and women, light,
day and night.
day, night, right? We have those particular cycles. We have ebbs and flows of tides.
Right.
We have the seasons.
Yeah. Hot and cold.
Hot and cold, right?
Right.
So there, but it's the meaning that we put on all those things that makes the fundamental difference, or the experience, different. Because, like, the farmer was very neutral, but it was the judgments of his neighbors, because from their perspective, they're thinking, well, if I lost a horse, I would be devastated. And it's sort of like, why are you so neutral about this? And as if you Google the story, you find out that the horse came back with 6 more horses. And wow, how really happy. And the farmer goes, maybe, maybe yes, maybe no. Right. And now he's got more horses' mouths to feed. It's like, so it's really relative. But again, if we look at things from that stoic level, where if we took an attitude that things that are happening to us more at a neutral rather than adding more meaning to it, I wonder how things would be different for us.
Right. Right. I mean, I think that all places that we find ourselves in, because I was reflecting again on the question that she asked, I think wherever you find yourself in, there's a learning there. It's not just from tragedy or sadness or pain and suffering that we learn. We also learn a lot about ourselves when we are thriving and feeling well and having joy in our lives. It really reaffirms all the things that we do want to continue to experience, right? So being just at the bottom wouldn't be helpful either, right?
Well, in one way, but in this, I'm gonna throw this out here. When you are happy, and I know you've experienced happiness,
right?
Have you ever questioned where that happiness is coming from?
No.
But when you are down, when you're sad, there seems to be this notion of, I got to figure out why I'm sad.
Well, I think Listen, yes, when we're happy, we don't tend to do the work as much. I get it. But there's value in actually reflecting on that. What about this is making me happy? How can I continue to recreate this? What are the things that keep me in this place of joy and happiness?
It would be helpful,
Right.
but it's
Right.
usually the
We
last
don't
thing on my
have
mind.
the same, yeah, we don't have the same motivation until that happiness gets threatened or becomes less,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
So the moment that it gets taken away, it goes back to what I was talking about, like with even the people that we love the most, once we lose them, that's when we really sit there and revisit all the missed opportunities to be present with that relationship, to truly enjoy every part of it, to be appreciative of what we have, right? We don't often do that when we have it. That's a very good point. We don't often do that when we have it.
No.
And so it is that threat of it not being there anymore that gets us on our toes, really thinking about what we're about to lose or what we don't want to lose and why we don't want to lose it. The reason why we know why we don't want to lose it is because we've been on the opposite end of the spectrum and we know where that leads us, right?
Well, we know where that leads us, but understanding, like from my perspective, understanding that life is ebbs and flows.
Right.
No, I know that, yes, I'm feeling happy right now. And you know what? In a few minutes, few hours, it's going to change. As a matter of fact, it changes moment to moment, right? It's always going like this. And so like I've never noticed anybody ever been at a high plane constantly, unless they're medicated in some way. Even that might be.
I mean, I'm not even sure how that would feel.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. But again, it's just noticing where you are on that spectrum. Right? It's like, oh, I'm in a low trough right now. Okay. Like I don't have to make a whole lot of stuff about that, but I can ride it just like I ride the high points of the wave.
Right. I mean, it's like this. We just don't want it to be like this, right?
No, that's
There's
kind of
no such thing as a flat line. That's not how life works.
no. Life is meant to be experienced.
Right. Right.
Fully.
Again, if it was a flat line, you wouldn't know either way.
No, it would be
all you would know, and that's why you need the highs and the lows to know the difference. I mean, it really is about the difference.
And that's the fundamental difference between robots and us.
Right.
Right? Is that yes, you can have a very robot attitude where sort of like nothing affects them. But do you want that in life, or do you really want that part of happiness, that part of sadness? Like, I love a good cry. Like I almost enjoy it. Like I was watching, I think it was American Idol with my wife or something, and they had brought this really young singer in who hadn't seen her dad, who had been deployed overseas for almost a year. And unbeknownst to her, they had brought him in. And so she did her audition and she dedicated the song to her dad. And it was very touching that point. And then all of a sudden they go, even the song was something like "I'll be there for you" kind of a thing. It's sort of like,
they know how to do that whole production.
Oh, I know. They hit every violin string that I had, and but I enjoyed it. Like I did, it's like my dad gets emotion, but his meaning to that is I have to be tough. I can't show my emotions. Right. So he stifles them, and I encourage him. I says, Dad, just have a good cry. Let's just, bawl our heads off, right? And I'm just
about normalizing that. It's about normalizing our sad feelings. It's about normalizing the lows. Like we glorify the highs, like we glorify the happiness and the laughter. It's about really normalizing the fact that the tears and the sadness and finding ourselves in lower places in life are part of life.
Yeah.
It's what allows us to see things we wouldn't otherwise be able to see. What really creates suffering is how much time we spend in it, judging it, feeling
And
bad about ourselves.
yeah,
You
no,
know, like,
100%. And I think that's where, we talk about the rock bottom or the
right,
turning point
right,
is when we're overbalanced, right? So if we understand that things are cyclical, that nothing lasts forever, but if it starts to feel like it's lasting forever, then it's that sort of like rabbit hole or going, circling the drain kind of a thing. And that's when it's sort of like this no hope, bad feelings, sad, depression, all these sort of negative kind of feelings get bunched up where we get intolerable for life. We get intolerable for the circumstances. Everything around us just seems to contribute to the feeling as opposed to trying to help the feeling
right.
or trying to get you out. So I think there's a realization at some point, and this is what I'm experiencing from people that are telling us, and including myself, because there was a point where I just sort of realized that there's got to be something different about this. There's got to be something more.
Mhm.
And that got me facing in a direction of hope as opposed to hopelessness, which is another choice at that point. When you're hitting rock bottom, there are really two choices. There's two directions you can look at, right?
Right.
And unfortunately, if I believed that there was hope, and so pointed myself into that direction. But I know several close friends and colleagues that didn't have that opportunity,
Right.
right? And are no longer with us. So um, there
I
is
mean,
there is that inherent problem with rock bottom.
I mean, let's think about this for a second. Rock bottom, right? I just take this example of rocks, right? The way I see it is the reason why you hit that rock bottom, unless some really terrible tragedy has happened, which is not in most cases, the reason why you hit that rock bottom is because you've been collecting rocks and you haven't been letting them out.
I'm liking this analogy. I'm
Yeah,
like,
you
yeah,
know, it's like you have so many rocks that you have suppressed and like think about it this way, right? That's why tears are there. That's why expressing our feelings is there. It's like you're throwing a rock every time you do that. But if
mm,
you find shame and guilt in that, and you keep holding those rocks, and I'm going to put it under my armpit, and I'm going to put it in my pants, then in my pockets, eventually the rocks are going to be heavier than you are going to be able to move with them, right? And that's how people hit rock bottom because they've been suppressing and repressing and hiding and holding and keeping things inside. And eventually, you're just not going to be able to hold it anymore.
no,
Eventually, those rocks are going to pop out.
yeah,
They're going to pop out in the form of this is now hitting you all in the face all at once.
yeah,
And the more we normalize that, having feelings of sadness and crying and having bad days and having moments where you don't feel so good about yourself or where you doubt yourself, and those are all part of being human. Those are all part of the process of how you do not do that very thing that you don't like. That's how you're going to shift out of it. The willingness and the ability to look at those things is the thing that's going to prevent you from going to the bottom. But if you're not willing to do that, life has a very funny way to continue to bring you rocks until you decide to throw these rocks out. Get them
and
out of your system.
and there's that one point that I've heard from so many of our guests, that one, the straw, the rock
Right.
that made the fundamental difference.
Right. And it's not always the worst thing that has happened to you. It's just
You know,
that one last rock that you
yeah,
can.
it was just like enough's enough, right?
Right.
I'm tired. I like whatever how you want to express it. Enough's enough,
Right.
and from that point, whatever that point is, you start to look towards what can I be doing differently.
Right.
And part of it in the healing structure is starting to drop the rocks,
Right.
letting go of thinking that somehow those rocks mean something.
But you need to,
Yeah.
right? I mean, think about it. When you feel joy, when you're experiencing joy, you go out there and share that. You're like vocal about it. You're expressing that. I've never seen anyone. I'm not telling anyone I'm happy right now, right? Because there's different stigma around
Yeah.
not feeling well, because it equates. We make it about ourselves. We make it about our own value and who we are, and it really is not. The more we really start reframing challenges and sadness as it's just something we need to look at, it's just showing you something
Mm-hmm.
that you need to look at. And the moment that you do, it dissolves. The moment that you do, you
Yeah.
can do something about it to shift it. It really is a gift. It's not wrapped in gold, and it's not the way we like to receive gifts. It's not fun, but it really ultimately holds a deeper meaning than we like to admit it has. Like, it really does hold a profound meaning in our lives. We're just not willing to look at it because there's so much stigma around it, because that means that we're not good enough. That means that there's something wrong with us. That means that we're not men enough, or, like, all of these beliefs, all of this conditioning around it is really creating unhealthy patterns in human beings. That's basically what it is.
And it's gluing those rocks together.
Keeping those rocks, keep on collecting the rocks,
Yeah.
because there's shame around shedding some tears. I mean, where do we come up with this notion that tears are a bad thing? Like, when you start looking at them as that's releasing all that crappy stuff you feel inside. Do you want to stop feeling it? Shed some tears.
Well,
Okay, after you have, and see the difference.
I was it last month? I did a workshop, conducted a workshop on being ruthless with your joy.
Right.
Right. There's also a little bit of a stigma about being, oh, you're too happy, you're too full of it, you're too whatever. Right. Who's setting these bars? Who's setting these standards?
It's a conditioning that wants us to find something wrong in everything. The self-critical judge that we all have, that we all have exercised our entire lives. The judge's been going to the gym every single day, and the part of us that's there to praise us has been sitting at home, laying down, not really hitting the gym. And that's really about practicing this other side of us and giving it voice, listening to it, turning to it, and realizing that it's there. It's not that it's not there. We're just not used to acknowledging it even.
Yeah. No, 100%. 100%. Yeah. No, I hope we answered or shed some particular light on the duality for
Audio girlfriend.
audio girlfriend. Yes. Sorry.
If you have any more questions, go ahead and share in the chat.
Yeah, or any comments, things like that. But yeah, no, I I think part of rock bottom is an acute sense of awareness, right? Because we can go along life seemingly fine, right? And it's only until there's something that is brought to our attention that kind of triggers us in a way of looking at or analyzing or reflecting on what's going on in our lives. It's sort of like, I didn't know I was screwed up until somebody pointed that out. Sort of like not saying ignorance, but I mean, part of that is like, what do you mean? Like questioning this piece, right?
Right. Right.
and it's like I'm happy, so why would I even entertain the idea of change?
But you know, even that,
Yeah.
even when people like often refer to themselves as being happy, is that really true? Or is there a lot of like hiding and coping and pretending? You know, like I think in today's world, when we look at social media and when we look at like what people are putting out there, like I also want to point this out. That's not always necessarily reflecting what it's actually going on the inside.
Or reality in it, in
Right. Or
period.
reality. So
Yeah.
it's not like it just comes as a surprise. It's been there. You just were looking the other way. It's been there. The signs were there. You ignored them. The signs were there. It's been there. You found a way to cope around them, right? Because when we all step back and look at take a really honest look at ourselves, there always is a place that we can be a little more honest about who we or like that we can look at and we see for the first time because we don't realize, right? Well, the reason why we don't realize is because early on we created all of this coping around it, and now the coping is our normal way of being, and all of that stuff that we have coped around, maybe it takes a really long time to show up. Maybe it's showing up in small ways in our lives, right?
Well, it's an interesting. Can I?
You can challenge me. Go ahead.
Well, okay. I was just looking for permission to explore this whole word of coping,
Right.
because in some ways it can be a very positive. It's a positive expression. Coping.
It can be positive. It can be, yeah. It has a positive intention. All
Yeah.
coping is created
Yeah.
to protect us from something.
Yeah.
But when you're protecting something, there's a sense of danger there, right?
Well, yeah. I mean,
What are we protecting?
yeah, but we're part of me, my understanding of coping is to stay afloat, right? So if I feel I'm being threatened to sink, then I want to cope, right? And that becomes sometimes a struggle and effort. I'm coping. But the
Right.
minute, and this is my realization, several years ago, when I understood that actually I'm quite buoyant, that that the struggle of coping and trying to do more was not necessary. As a matter of fact, it was actually getting in the way of me being resilient.
Right. But often that's because you did the work of looking,
Well, totally. Yeah.
right? You saw it, right?
Yeah.
But what happens oftentimes is, let's just give tangible examples. Like as a kid, I learned to become a people pleaser because it's not okay for me to say no, whatever the reason is, right?
Yes.
So now I become a people pleaser, and everything in my life that I do is guided by that people pleasing, right? And then you're no longer living with your parents, and you no longer really need to be a people pleaser to survive, right? We're using these words really broadly,
Mm-hmm.
but you continue to people please because that's what the program that was installed, the coping that was installed around, like around, frankly, a situation of discomfort,
Yeah.
right? Or an inability to say no, let's say, right?
But there's that contrast, that duality piece
Right,
of noticing, when you notice the discomfort
right,
and the sort of the notion of sort of being intolerant with that discomfort, is when you and I'm just putting words in your mouth, you correct me, but it is you did the exploration to realize, holy crap, I'm running a program. So now I'm understanding more. But if it wasn't for the fact that you were uncomfortable or had that,
right, right.
right,
Of
yeah,
course,
so it's a necessary thing.
of course. I mean, it developed to protect you from something. It's just that, when these things develop in ourselves, we're too young to be able to do this inner work and look at ourselves, or
Well, we
even,
think everything's normal.
right. So then it becomes your normal. And now your normal is running you. And
Well,
it's
everything everything is, when you think about it, like I've got my grandkids, got a couple of young ones that are like, when you are experiencing life for the first time, everything is normal. Like everything, like I don't know a contrast. I don't know, right? Comparison's always a big killer of happiness, right? But I didn't know anything outside my own world until I started to experience having friends and then going out, and it's like, oh, there's different parents here. Whoa,
I
that's
love,
different.
yeah, I love what you just pointed to. I love what you just pointed to. And this is such a, it took us a little bit to get here. This
Sorry.
is no, this is such a good point because, in talking about my own story, I always think about how do you know what is functional when you're born in dysfunction, right? So I really thought about this a lot. Like what prompted me to do all the work on myself that I did? Well, it's a very contrast. It's the ability to be able to compare with something different. Because when you have only seen one way of things, right? Again, that duality is necessary, right? That is your normal. That's all you know. How would you know that there's any different unless you have experienced different? And that's always been my measure. It's a moment that I was given or shown or experienced the opposite of what my normal was, that I was now able to question that normal. I was able to be like, wait a minute, I don't have to feel like crap all the time. Are you
Mm.
telling me that I don't have to feel like this all the time? Are you telling me that other families function differently? Like if you have never experienced that, how would you know? And this again goes into this concept of duality. Without the opposite, you wouldn't know where you're standing.
Well, yeah, I mean, like if there was only black cars in the
Right,
world, right, and that's all you ever knew, right, you would be going like, I'm buying a car and it's black, right? It's like
right.
that's just becomes it. And then
You're
somebody
exactly,
says,
yeah,
all of a sudden you notice something different. It's like, oh, you mean there's an option?
right,
And I think that's a key point in the rock bottom bounce back,
right,
is realizing there's an option,
right,
that you have an option, that there's something different. Now, what I like what you just said is it's coming from your point of view.
right,
So, and fundamentally, I know I've experienced this in I won't tell you the subjects, but you know where somebody comes up to me and points out that, like I said, like I'm coasting, like I feel for everything's fine, and then somebody comes around and he says, no, you're all mucked up, you're all this, you're not right. I say, well, what do you mean I'm not right? So it's this imposed, and you've seen this in past in history, where you know civilizations and things like that, with, I don't know, maybe good intentions, I have no idea, but it's sort of like, they come in and they see and observe, well, you could be doing better,
right.
but I actually am content. I'm actually content. No, you could be doing better. And so it's sort of like this imposed. So there's a fundamental difference between having this outside influence that's sort of pointing out all these different things that they see as an issue from their point of view,
Right.
versus having a self-realization of things that, oh, I'm becoming aware of, that I could be doing things differently. I'm seeing things differently. And that's the catalyst for continued change, like for
Right.
optimal change and empowerment.
I mean, one just sets off all your defenses.
Well, totally.
So
Right.
when someone tells you this, and this is not, like, and I think that's where coaches come in with an incredible skill. If you're a skilled coach, you can really help the person see it on their own.
On
But
their own.
a
Yes.
lot more powerful for you to just ask questions that point the person in a certain direction versus telling them, right? We're never supposed to tell what we notice because, like you're pointing, We're all looking through a lens. There's nothing we can do about it, right? But as coaches, we are trained to just swap those lenses. Let's just try different lenses. Let's play with this, right? And help the person do that on their own.
Yeah.
But you're very right that it's when we realize and see it in ourselves that we now accept it in a different way, that we now can do something about it, that we receive it.
You're
But
empowered.
when someone tells us, when someone is imposing it on us, what happens is like, we're just defending now. All the barriers go up, like, what do you mean? There's something wrong with me? How can that even be possible, right? We would just, it actually makes it worse, actually makes the person's ability to even ever be able to recognize it even less, because now they're like busy defending themselves instead of looking within themselves
Yeah,
in
you're
a
shutting.
useful way. They're
Yeah.
shutting down. They're
Yeah.
going to fight or flight. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's why it's fun. It's important to have that part of that realization, because that's the turning point of healing. Like, that gets you out of the rock bottom, that gets you out of the pit, is to first of all notice that you're in the pit, not being told by somebody else going, oh, you're depressed, you're this, whatever, right?
I mean,
So,
if I could move out of depression by watching somebody else's depression and then moving out of it, that would be amazing, right? But that's not the way it works. Like,
no.
we all have to experience it ourselves. Yeah, there are things that we can learn from by observing others, but typically there's some level of experience attached to that, to our ability to even be able to consider that, right? Because we've been there some way, somewhat, right? And hopefully, when we hit a rock bottom once or twice, then we've been there and we're not going to go all the way down in that direction. Next time, we're able to recognize it and see it faster because we have that contrast, because that duality is there. We've been there, we know what it feels
We
like.
understand it.
We
Yeah.
don't want to feel it.
There's a
Right?
reason why there's an up and down button on an elevator.
Right.
It's like, but it's that level of understanding that changes all the time. So when you have a self-realization moment, that raises you up in the elevator automatically. And so even if the dips were of the same magnitude, the experience is not the same, because I will guarantee you, if you found that rock bottom and had that self-realization pieces, you would never go back to there. Doesn't say that you don't go back down. You're just never going to go back down to
You
that.
just swim back up a lot faster.
A lot faster. The ebbs and flows are it's never smooth, right? Life was always like that, right? So it's super cool subject. I hope other people got something out of this. I
I
got a
did get
couple of
something
insights.
out of it. Don't hope.
Yeah. I can't speak for people, but I know what I experienced. Like I said, I got a couple of insights from our conversation. I appreciate your honesty and openness about this too.
No, I love that we got to chat today. It's the two of us. It's been a while. We're gonna plan more of these coming up, and I'm gonna see you next week.
Next week, yes. All right. So what do we have to do?
Subscribe, follow, share our show. You can catch the replays on YouTube, on the podcast, and just leave us your comments if you have any questions. And under each show, you can comment, and we will respond to you. Yeah. Spread the word. Help us amplify your impact, everyone. See you next week.
Bye now.
Ciao, ciao.
Bye. And